So this guy here from Amsterdam is working on a film. I don't know if you met him at the opening. It'd be nice for you to get a couple of words. I'm spending some time with him today. He's just working on this independent film. I know you said you had to pick up the key today. Yeah, even if you're supposed to speak to him for 5 minutes.
Yeah, so you came here in '83. First, you had this this gallery called A&P.
Yes.
And Anton told me it was kind of sort of. It looked like a. The name was derived from the supermarket.
Right.
Kind of
And my brother is named. My name's Andrew, and Paul. My brother's named Paul. So we took our initials, A&P. But we were interested in art at supermarket prices, or art that was affordable. Not literally supermarket prices, but I always had things there for $1.99 posters, and I played off of that. I played off Warholian kind of aesthetic of, or Duchampian type of aesthetic of, or Fluxus. You know, we're interested in unconventional art. That's why artist books and posters. We're very big on posters and ephemeral material. Like the postcard was just important that we sent out. Well, the flyers were just as important as the paintings on the wall. Right. And so, and a lot of it, which is nice, a lot of that stuff is free, just like the newspaper is free. So the Lower East Side has a rich culture going back 200 years. You know, for Emma Goldman and the labor movement, the social political movements, a cultural movement, the beat poets, the abstract expressionists, the birth of punk. Jimi Hendrix played in Tompkins Square Park. The Fugs, Bob Dylan.
Right.
So everyone thinks the scene in the 60s was Greenwich Village, but the stage was Greenwich Village, but they lived here. It was affordable. Greenwich Village was affordable maybe in the 20s and 30s, I guess up into the 70s, if you were part of the Artist Loft program.
Right.
So
this space, you went in here?
We reacted against Soho. We reacted against Donald Judd. We kind of introduced the figure back to the art world. You know, we
instead of minimalism and
we reacted against minimalism, and so graffiti art was born in the Bronx, the Lower East Side, the other boroughs of the city. You know, it was a people's art. It was still conceptual in some ways. Like graffiti art is all about futurism and constructivism, you know. I mean, there's roots there, even if we were naive about it or not. But you know, but we introduced the figure back into our world. The Times Square show, ABC No real estate show, that flipped the tide of the art world, of culture. It flipped the tide of culture. That post-punk period, the hardcore movement, hardcore punk movement. I was the roadie of the Bad Brains at the time. So music, culture, poetry readings, poetry slams. Yeah, I'm trying to say this neighborhood has had a very rich tradition.
You still organize poetry slams here, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a multimedia space.
Yeah.
So there's theater, poetry readings, videos, film. The way we define art, like I said, the more ephemeral imagery is just as important as, you know, and yeah, it was rooted in the A&P, because I squatted sporadically in '83, but I kind of dropped out of art school around that time. I teach at this school I left now, the School of Visual Arts. I teach artist books. It's called Printed Matter, artist books, zines, posters. They hired me in the graphic design department to corrupt the commercial designers. So I kind of get the misfits of the graphic design department. But I teach drawing and painting there. It's an experimental drawing painting class between realism and abstraction. But anyway, yeah, so going back to the A&P, that was the roots.
Yeah.
I timed the 25 years from that period.
And who were the initiators?
There were a lot of artist-run spaces back then. We lived in the back. Our rents were $500 a month. They were artist-run operations. I mean, Pat Hearn, Fun Gallery, Civilian Warfare, Gracie Mansion. We all started as shoestring budgets. Our rents were $500 a month, so you could live, you could be free. We had our hours were 1 to 6, because we had the whole cabaret life after hours, social clubs. You know, it ran 24/7. So the underground clubs at night, you know, places like the Mud Club, 8BC. So it was interesting, our hours. I'm looking at it now. Why were we open 8 to 6 when Chelsea is like, we were open from Wednesday to Sunday? Because Soho closed on Sunday. We were open on Sunday. Our hours here are Friday from 3 to 7, and then Saturday and Sunday. We got to work during the week.
Right.
We appropriated the name Bulletspace from the name brand of heroin that was sold on the block. We sold more heroin out of this neighborhood than any other place in the world in the 70s and early 80s. It was a heroin capital of the world. During the Contra cocaine period, the crack epidemic, it was fucking hell here. It was a war zone. It was the end of the Cold War. We didn't want to try to romanticize the word bullet. We use bullet as an art, of a means of resistance or an act of resistance, because we were at war with the city also. There were all these abandoned buildings, but they were all going to the city developers' friends, or all these non-profit millionaire groups. You know, so we were more independent: plumbers, artists, activists, electricians, dropouts of society, volunteer dropouts, outcasts. You know, you name it. Musicians, poets. That was our mix. It reflected the melting pot of New York City. We had everyone: the locals, the natives, the migrants, the new migrants, people from El Salvador squatting, you know. Besides, I'm telling you about some of the squatters from Europe that were involved. You know, there were 2 people from Berlin here that were very involved. English Steve was very involved from Brixton squatters movement. People from Amsterdam, you know, from where you're from. You had a strong... So there was this network with the whole zine culture. It was before the internet. It was before, but we had our zine culture that we still, you know, exchange a lot of information. So that's how the word bullet came about. We appropriated the name brand of heroin, and we transformed that as the art of a means of resistance, because we were illegal here for 20 years. You know, that's how we used the urine bottles. You know, if they ever tried to evict us, we would throw the urine bottles off the you know, just like in medieval times, hot oil off the castles would prevent the invasions. Yeah, so it was a total war. It was war in the neighborhood. It was fucking war against the drug dealers, war against being victim of the drug culture, being villains of it. You know, our best friends turned into junkies. You know.
So in the early 80s, the main problems you had to encounter were the drug dealers and the drugs and the police.
The police and gentrification, and the police
really came in.
The police become a private police force for the developers. You know, I mean, the police they're hardcore working class guys. You know, I grew up with all of them. You know, a lot of my friends were firemen and cops, but you know that they got suckered into being the police, a private police force, and the rich used them. You know, the developers used the cops. You know. And the poor guys got caught, and a lot of them are bad guys, a lot of them are good guys, just like the squatters too. We attracted the best people in the country and the worst. People flocked here like it was after the Tompkins Square Park riot. All the anarchists of the world flocked here. It was a revolutionary time. Besides culture, it was politically, you know. It was like, wow, they're taking over buildings, you know. We won. We had over 500 squatters here at one point. We had over 30 buildings. Now we're down to maybe a couple hundred squatters, and we got 11 buildings, and we all got legalized. We're the first ones to sign up. I regret it. I wish we were more independent. The interest we got to pay the banks, well, they put a gun to our head. You sign this piece of paper or you're getting kicked out. You know, so there were tanks in this neighborhood. They would evict our buildings. Giuliani came in with fucking tanks. All the police were armed with guns. They were shooting tear gas and rubber bullets at us. Some people got killed. Couple of people went to jail. They gave 2 of us jail sentence of a year in jail.
So
I don't think they did a year, but for inciting riots. We wanted to independently fix up our building, but the banks would only let us work with licensed contractors.
Right.
So we had my brother, the anarchist architect, he was our architect, and we tried to do things ourselves. We did all of our sheetrock, you know.
The initial intentions was to create an artist space or a place where
Yeah, come on in.
people where people could have exhibitions or performances or poetry readings, or was it primarily focused on living here?
It was both. You can't live without a political revolution, and you can't live without a cultural revolution. So it was both. You can't live without art, you can't live without it. So it was always our intent. Well, first it was living, I guess, but we were known as the 6 o'clock squad at first. We were a group of artists from Rivington Street and the A&P Gallery. Those are shoes in the building. That was the first exhibition performance piece that I was involved in. I collected all the shoes in all the apartments. This building was abandoned in '77, so all those are from the 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s. You know how some people keep their shoes for 30 years? I have a shoe fetish.
So you first, when you entered the building, you first focused on the primary needs, fixing it up.
Yes,
And
but we
living
still
it.
had events here. We still had performances.
He was still working.
Yeah, so we moved in here. Yeah, living was important. Whereas I know in Europe, your squats are more cultural centers because your rents are a little more affordable. Maybe not now, but back then. So I noticed in Europe, they were more community cultural centers. Here was a desperate living situation. But we're the only building that has, between us and C Squad, that has a cultural space. They have a stage there. You should probably visit C Squad. We're the only building, because I kind of felt it was our duty to give back. We stole a building, give back to the community. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There are over 5,000 people that lived here and worked here and exhibited here. This was a list I put in 1998, over 10 years ago. I tried to do an estimation of all the people that lived here. So this is doubled. And these are some of the artist books. I mentioned this is the Zero book. We kind of used our thumbprint as a signature for the page. That was a favorite page. That's when I met Alexandra. Anti-Utopia was another artist book project I was involved in. This was books we made after 9/11. They're sort of memorial books. We did Tower 1 and Tower 2. So this is actually the dust from the World Trade Center, the actual dust. I encased in the bottom of the book. So we're interested in unconventional book binding also. We purposely didn't bind this book because we imitated all the paper that was blowing. Like 3 weeks later, there was still paper falling from the sky. So it was this infinite number of paper. That's why it's so... This kind of imitated a beam. That kind of imitated more of a cloud. These are other artifacts from the building. This is when our pipes would burst. We constantly would have pipes bursting, the copper pipes, because we had primitive heating. We used our wood-burning stoves. This was the wrench we made because the city kept putting new locks on our fire hydrants because our fire hydrants were our wells. So they kept capping it. So we made a special wrench to open up. This is a blade that we used to steal our electricity. This is a blade that melted. While we used to go in there with rubber gloves and rubber around our tools, but sometimes it would backfire and explode on us. But this is a blade that melted. These are zines we put together: Survival Without Rent, Bullet and Active Resistance. Other newspapers. We're very big in publications. We had a print shop here for 10 years. This is another artist book called Confusion. These are some photos. This is a painting I did of a fishhook. That was from the Your House Is Mine book.
Yeah, can you tell me more about that? Because I see many hooks and I see you fishing in one of the film.
Well, I grew up on the Hudson River, so I fished a lot in the river, and I kind of used the hook as a metaphor for some of my earlier work. I don't really use it as much anymore, even though they're sculptural. This is part of an idea to make 100 of these hooks. You know, it's a kind of a metaphor, especially I like it at this scale. When I paint these large hooks, it's sort of a human scale. We're like the worm, or we're the suckers at the bottom of the ocean. So it's a metaphor for addictions, for, there's always those invisible hooks in front of us, always, you know, our addictions to sex, to sugar, substance abuse. You know, we're all addicted to something. Mm-hmm. So it was a metaphor, but it was a beautiful symbol too. You know, I fish, it's a good hunting tool. You know, I always, even the homeless people, you know, they're always, I always imagine them walking around with a fishing pole. They're just collecting cans, you know, they're working. Mm-hmm. You know, it's our bow and arrow too, you know. Right. So it has all my work has an open signature to it, a duality to it. It's very threatening, but yet very beautiful somehow. We always fall in love with our enemy in order to survive. Yeah, this was the book we made. We spent 5 years on this book. One of the first people to buy the book, a guy named Anders Thornberg from Sweden, he said it reminds me of the tombstone of New York. Because New York was going through a very dark period at this time. I was explaining that to you before. In the end of the 80s, we went through another recession. A recession was just as powerful as what's going on now. So we went through a pretty dark period coming out of the crack AIDS epidemics, the financial situation that was going on in the city at this time. So we made this book in response to the Tompkins Square Park riots. The neighborhood was united after that. So this was a book and street project. Each poster, we made 300 posters of each image. Half of them for the book edition, 150 books, then 150 posters of each went on the street. We printed 10,000 posters by hand. So it was a community project of over 100 people involved. And I kind of organized it and edited it. Nadia Cohen and my brother Paul were very involved. Paul, the architect, was involved with the structure of it. I don't do these projects by myself. Part of my aesthetic is very collaborative. Some of the work in here, the name of the show is Andrew Castrucci in the Bulletspace archive. Some of it is solo work, a lot of it is collaborative work, and then there's other solo work by other artists. These are the wood-burning stoves we used. I just kind of saved them, sort of an evolution of our stoves. This was made by Robert Parker, and these were made by Toby Halleck and myself. These are forged and welded together. This is the last of the books, part of the book edition. We made 150 of them.
What's going to happen with them? You're going to keep them as an archive?
I distribute them all over the world. The State Museum in Berlin has it. The Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam has a book. There's a museum, the Graphic Design Museum in Hamburg has a book. I can't pronounce the name. The Victoria Albert Museum has a book. The Museum of Modern Art has a book in New York. Getty Center has a book. So it's kind of interesting how we penetrated the castle. It reminds me of, what's that famous book, The Castle? It was interesting. The city was evicted by Kafka. It reminds me of when I would penetrate the museums or these castles and they would buy a book. In the meantime, it was kind of ironic. The city was trying to evict us, yet they were buying one of our books. Because the public library in New York were the first people to buy it. So the director of the museum purposely took real estate money to purchase the book. So I really, that was a bit of performance art, to go into these museums and these rich institutions and get them to own a book. And a lot of times I would donate the books to them, but most of the times they would pay for it. Like the Gutenberg Museum bought a book. I donated a book to them because they have the first books from every civilization in the world, from Egypt, Egyptian to Native American, from Arabic to the famous Gutenberg Bible, and books that came out of the Renaissance. So they didn't have a lot of money for acquisition, so I donated a book to them. So a lot of the Girls Club in Lower East Side, I donated a book to. So we do, out of the 150, 50 of them went to the artists and participants, and I had 100 to sell. So these books finance exhibitions here and other publications here. We don't really get much grant money. We're more independent or self, even though maybe 5% of the budget came from grants of this project.
And the artists who are in that book, are they all from this neighborhood, or how did they?
They're rooted in this neighborhood, but it does branch out to the other boroughs, like Lady Pink is in Queens now, Lee Quinones is in Brooklyn now.
Where's Lady Pink?
Lee Quinones was born here. This is one of the original drawings of Lady Pink from the poster. Original drawings of Lee Quinones. Lee Quinones lived in the projects at Seward Park on the Lower East Side. Well, if you didn't live here, this was your stage. The Lower East Side in the 80s this was a big stage for you. It still is. I mean, we're more diversified now. But
so the way I understood this book is a collection of posters that you put up in this neighborhood because it was run down and you wanted to put life back.
That was part of it.
Yeah.
It was part of our defense to exist here.
Right.
It was part of
to make it livable.
The book was kind of a last stand too, to the neighborhood. I think it helped us get the building. It helped us get political support. But I was more interested in an artifact than anything else. But it had a strong political, social force to it. This was a light box I made. This was the light box we used to burn all the screens. We had our own independent print shop here. So I glued 500 slides on here. And this recorded the street aspect of the book. You could look at it through a magnifying glass, or you look at it with the naked eye. And I have this loop here for details. But this is just important as the book artifact that's in the libraries and museums or in private collections, but seeing it on the street. I was asked to do this for someone that owns one of the books, one of the museums, libraries in New York. They wanted a record of the street aspect of it.
It's wonderful.
So we're making 10 of these. So it's just as important. And these stones on the floor are from an abandoned building over 20 years ago, as I put the posters up on that they demolished. So I saved the fragments of the cinder blocks and sort of ripped posters from other buildings. So I'm very much interested in this ephemeral artifacts and material. So these kind of document the tent city, the activists and homeless people burning their tents. Before the evictions, we would light 100 tents on fire. This is when the tank came into 13th Street to evict us. Some of them were marching with posters as the parade. This is 13th Street again. This is what the neighborhood looked like in the early 80s when I started to be involved in this neighborhood.
Oh my God. Sure looks like it.
My grandparents are originally from the Lower East Side and Hell's Kitchen and Little Italy on Mulberry Street. So I kind of feel like I came back to my roots somehow. Even though my family was a little disappointed because we finally reached the middle class. I come from a working class, middle class family in New Jersey. and I grew up in Hoboken. We moved from Hell's Kitchen, Little Italy, to Hoboken, New Jersey, and then I moved further up the river. A lot of Italians moved into Cliffside. So my father always said, or my grandfather said, man, we spent 100 years to get the fuck out of the ghetto, and you come back and move back in, man, what's wrong with you? He would come visit me. And he said, this reminds me of Union City. He was still living in Union City, my grandparents, but my father would often say that. You know, also, more so my father, you know, what the fuck you doing, man? It took us fucking 50, 100 years to get out of this fucking ghetto, and you come back. It was a little shock to the family. You know, I went to art school here. That's what drew me back. You know, and, you know, it's a story of culture and art and music, and we live on the margins. But I always feel that I was a volunteer dropout, or maybe I was kicked out. You know, just how I wasn't accepted in the art school arena, or just economically, I couldn't afford to spend $500 rent anymore. So that's what drove me to squatting. You know, rents are $2,000 a month now, and $3,000 a month in New York City. How are you going to remain in New York City? Yeah. And you know, you felt like you built this. You were part of the building of the city from your grandparents to now. You fucking want to make a stand. You still want to be here, you know? So, you know, it's any means necessary, the way I look at it. You know, to make art, to live, any means fucking necessary. I shouldn't use the F word so much, but it has that, there was this intensity of, this is a piece from 1983. It's kind of self-explanatory. This is a new piece that I've been doing. It's made out of cow shit and cow manure. It's called the Shithead series. It's a portrait of the Bush administration. That's a portrait of Karl Rove. And this is a portrait of GW. I did it with my son. You know, it's just, you know, like kids playing with shit. And I felt like a kid. We went to the circus and we collected elephant dung. And then I mixed it with cow shit from the local farmers, because we've been spending a lot of time upstate. We bought some land up there. We go up there in the summer. We didn't squat it, but it felt like we're squatting it. So I've incorporated a lot of rural environment into the work. These are from beehives. This is a beehive I made out of a dollar sign. There's bees that come out of here occasionally. They don't really make it, but my plan is to do an installation of another beehive, a honey beehive. This is more of a wasp beehive, a honey beehive. I'm going to mic it and accelerate the sound of the bee's hive. And there'll be flowers in here, so they could, that's part of an installation. These are the sunflowers. This is part of a series called Cement Shoes that I've been working on, I guess coming from New Jersey. This one's called He Got Away. This is another piece with the Cement Shoe series. These are fishing waders, kind of in relationship to the fishing and the hooks. But it deals with human frailty, you know. This was the sledgehammer we originally used to break into the building, right here. We walked down the street with a guitar case, Tanesh Weber, and a couple of other members of this building. And we broke into the back of the building. The basement door was cinder blocked. We came through there in the beginning. That's in 1985. This is Lee Quinones lived in the squat. This is a tag of Lee that was on the 5th floor. So it's I wanted to save an old relic before the renovation happened. A piece I did at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I had to get rid of my piss somehow. And I use the urine, or I use the gold in my work. I'm interested in alchemy, turning shit into gold. You know, I love the Met. You know, I go there all the time. But on the other hand, it was a confrontation in the tradition of the Italian futurists against classical art, or the Museum of Dead Artists. So I did read a manifesto. I guess it's self-explanatory. the 20th century. Some Rembrandts at the Metropolitan Museum of Art are fakes.